Hola, everybody. Well, Pop's here, and it's another episode of Story Time coming at you. This will be chapter 5, and kind of eerie because I'm reading this during the solar eclipse. We are in Texas, where the solar eclipse is supposed to be rather prominent, and it is starting to get dark outside. So I thought it'd be a good time for story time during the solar eclipse. So without further ado, here we go. Please remember that this is something that I am writing. It is very rough. This is the rough draft of it all. But I do encourage comments, whether you enjoy the story, whether you're not enjoying the story, good or bad. Constructive criticism is, of course, welcome. And here we go, Chapter 5. Needing no encouragement from its rider, the horse, liberated from the burden of being hitched to the wagon, galloped down the road at a swift pace, arriving at the abandoned farmhouse in just over an hour. Dismounting swiftly, the old man led the horse to a patch of tall grass. Grasping a handful of grass, he hastily rubbed the horse down, whispering softly into its ear as he did so. Satisfied that the horse would not just run, but would remain feeding in the tall grass, the old man approached the farmhouse. The door to the farmhouse hung crookedly on a single hinge. Rising up from the rich earth beneath numerous vines and other plants had commenced to suffocate the outside walls. The old man half pushed and half lifted the front door open, stepping inside the farmhouse. He appeared to be in some sort of kitchen. Looking around, the old man got the sense that the occupants of the farmhouse had left in a hurry. Upon a table centered in the room was an array of dishes and utensils. Atop of the stove, against the far wall, sat a few pots, and the shelves were fairly decently stocked, a thick layer of dust resting atop of everything. Passing through a doorway on his right, the old man entered into a large family room. The room was sparsely furnished, with a few home-crafted wooden chairs and benches. A hand-woven rug lay spread out on the floor, any color long since faded. Off to his left, built into the wall, was a rather large fireplace, a handful of seasoned logs haphazardly stacked off to one side. For a few minutes the old man simply stood there, recalling the shadows of the past, a time when a family occupied the home. The moment now having passed, the old man set about to the task at hand. He spent the next half hour pushing the furniture against the walls and rolling up the rug, dragging it across the floor to let it rest next to the fireplace. Retrieving a slender chunk of burnt wood from the fireplace, he walked to the center of the room. Using the fire-scorched tip of the wood, he drew a large circle on the floor. At specific spots along the perimeter of the circle, he drew intricate runes, reciting magical incantations as he drew. The circle complete, he tossed a piece of wood aside, wiping the dirt from his hands on his rich red robe. Lying in the back of the wagon, Olaf struggled to shake off the grogginess of the sleep spell. For a few minutes he lay still, staring up at the starlit night sky, forcing his beady yellow eyes to focus. The haziness inside his head diminished, and with it came the realization of his current predicament. Attempting to sit up, Olaf found his movements restricted. Across his chest was a thin leather strap which held his arms pinned against his sides. Inhaling a lung-capacity breath, he held it a split second prior to forcefully breathing it out, at the same time thrusting his huge muscular green arms away from his body, snapping the leather strap. Able to sit up at last, Olaf became aware of three things instantly. First, the old man was gone, his shackles having been unlocked, now resting empty on the wagon floor. Second, the wagon was no longer moving. And lastly, the driver, as well as his three comrades, were unconscious, lost in a deep sleep of a magical spell. Frantically, he kicked at the orc nearest him, arousing him from the slumber. Reaching across the now wakening orc, he violently shook the orc closest to him. Unsheathing his dagger, he removed the leather straps that encircled the two orcs. Unable to reach the last of the four, Olaf passed his dagger to the orc next to him. "Get him up now," Olaf commanded. "The old man has escaped." Exiting the back of the wagon, Olaf stomped off to awaken the driver. "What do we do now?" asked one of the three orcs who were now coming up to stand beside Olaf. "We find him, and we do it fast. If Roshan hears of this, we will all be dead. Garang, go round up the horses. You two figure out how to fix up some sort of harness for the horses. I will see if I can find some tracks that will help us determine the direction in which he fled." "And what about him?" asked one of the orcs, pointing up at the driver. "What about him?" replied Olaf. "He too was put to sleep. He had nothing to do with the old man escaping. Besides, we need him to drive the wagon. Now stop wasting time and get to work." Having only a sliver of moonlight and the light of the stars, it took several minutes before Olaf discovered the tracks left by the fleeing horse and its rider. He followed the tracks up onto the road. Once on the road, the tracks merged with those made by the wagon and the other horses earlier, making it almost impossible to follow. Still, here and there, Olaf was able to find a lone track. For another 15 minutes, he stuck to the trail. Certain that the old man was headed back towards the keep, Olaf left the trail to rejoin the others. Rejoining the others, Olaf noticed that they had managed to reharness 4 of the 5 remaining horses to the wagon, the 5th being tethered to the back of the wagon. "The tracks lead back towards the keep," Olaf stated as he approached his 3 companions who were standing in a circle at the rear of the wagon. "Get in there. Get in. There is no time to waste." While the 3 orcs climbed into the back of the wagon, Olaf strode past them, halting alongside the driver. Pointing back along the trail they had traveled earlier, Olaf indicated to the driver the direction he was to proceed. With a slight nod of his head, the driver acknowledged he understood what was requested of him. Taking the whip back up into his hands, he waited for Olaf to situate himself in the back of the wagon with the others. The silence of the night was broken by the sharp crack of the whip and the whinnying of the horses and the creak of the wagon as it lurched forward. An hour passed. The 4 orcs, each lost in their own thoughts of what torturous pain Roshan would inflict upon them should they fail to recapture the old man. Fighting to control the internal panic that attempted to take control of them. Said nothing, as if speaking of it would somehow make it come to manifestation. Olaf slammed his fist against the side of the wagon, once, twice, 3 times, signaling the driver to halt. "Why are we stopping?" Garang asked. "I must check the road to make sure we are still following the tracks," answered Olaf as he jumped down from the back of the wagon. When he was well out in front of the wagon and the horses, Olaf focused his attention on the road. After a few minutes, he found the tracks he was searching for. As before, he followed the trail for some distance before returning to the others. Climbing back into the wagon, Olaf again banged against the side of the wagon, which resumed its journey, bringing the orcs closer to the keep, the last place they wanted to be heading for. Over the next hour, Olaf repeated the process twice more. Having stopped for a 3rd time, Olaf could no longer find any tracks. Standing at the back of the wagon, Olaf informed the others that the old man must have left the road between the last stop and this stop. "We will need to go back," Olaf said. "We will need to walk, 2 of us on each side of the road." 10 minutes into the search, Garang found fresh tracks coming off the road, leading to a farmhouse not too far off in the distance. Waving the other orcs to his location, Garang and the other 2 orcs waited while Olaf bent down to examine the tracks more closely. Standing and nodding his head, affirming that the track belonged to the beast that had borne the old man away, Olaf led his companions back to the road. "Garang and I will continue down the road to see if there are any returning tracks. You 2 stay here and be on the alert in case the old man comes back this way. If he does, do not let him escape. Dead or alive, I do not care. He must not be allowed to escape. Come, Garang, we need to move fast," Olaf said, not waiting for a response, turning away from the others and marching off down the road. 20 minutes later, Olaf and Garang returned. Finding no other tracks, both were optimistic that the old man had stopped for the night, seeking refuge in the farmhouse. Olaf was also pleased that during his absence with Garang, the driver had managed to turn the wagon around and was now sitting off to one side of the road. Gathering the orcs around him, Olaf explained his plan. After hearing the plan, the others quickly agreeing to it and feeling confident that very soon the old man would be back in their care and their journey to the fortress would resume, they set off stealthily in the direction of the farmhouse. Beneath the partial moonlit sky, the old man gently caressed the horse's neck. Leaning in closer, he whispered soothingly in the twitching ears of the beast. "Soon," he whispered. "Very soon they will come. We have done well, you and I, my friend. We left a trail for them to follow, albeit not an easy trail to follow, but not an impossible one either. And when they see you here, they will be sure they have me. But oh, how wrong they will be," the old man continued. "I have prepared a very special surprise inside for them. No, my friend, I will not reveal it to you. You will just have to be patient, my friend. But for now, I must leave you. I need to rest. I will need a great deal of energy when the time comes." Giving the horse a final caressing stroke, the old man went off in search of a place that would conceal him and allow him to rest peacefully while he awaited the arrival of those who sought to put him back in chains. 200 yards behind the farmhouse, the old man found a large oak. The canopy of leaf-laden branches blocking the sliver of moonlight surrounding the immediate area in a total darkness. Resting his back against the thick trunk, the old man closed his eyes, falling into a restful slumber. It was not the sound of the orcs moving stealthily in the night that disturbed the old man from his sleep, but rather a single snort from the horse nearby. Lying still in the darkness, focusing on his hearing, searching the sounds of the night for anything out of the ordinary, and finding nothing. Trusting in the more sensitive senses of the horse, the old man rose to his feet, and although he could neither see or hear them, he was certain that the orcs had at last arrived and were now closing in on the farmhouse. The time to spring the trap was simply a matter of minutes away. Stepping out of the darker shadows created by the oak, he silently began to make his way to the back of the farmhouse. His presence inside the farmhouse was not necessary. However, he would need to be within spell distance, no further than 12 feet, to trigger the trap. Arriving at his destination, the old man concealed himself behind a clump of overgrown bushes along the left side of the back wall. It was the perfect spot. It provided protection from any who may wander behind the farmhouse and was within range needed to cast a spell. All he needed to do now was be patient and wait. Olaf was the first to reach the farmhouse. He did not enter right away, but waited for the other three to arrive. The front door, hanging in its single hinge, presented the orcs with a problem. Due to their large body size, the door would need to be torn from its single hinge to permit them entry. This, of course, was not the problem. With their great strength, they could tear it from the hinge in a matter of seconds. It was the noise, which could not be avoided, in doing so, that was the problem. Finding no practical solution to this problem, it was decided that one of them would tear the door down, casting it aside, and the other three would rush into the farmhouse, daggers in hand. Grasping the door in hand, Garang looked to Olaf and the other two orcs. They were ready. With a single pull, the door came free of its hinge. The wood shattered as the screws were torn from the frame. Olaf rushed past Garang, the other two orcs on his heels. Speed was more important now than stealth. Dishes clattered to the floor as the orcs in their haste tossed the table aside. Past the living room they rushed. Down the narrow corridor they ran. Straight for the door at the end of the corridor Olaf ran. The other orcs peeling off from behind him to burst into the rooms along the corridor, only to reappear again in seconds from the empty rooms. The door at the end of the corridor was locked. Olaf slammed his shoulder into it. The door burst open, his motion carrying him into what appeared to be the master bedroom. The room was empty. In frustration, Olaf flipped the bed centered in the room over. Garang, who had been the last one to enter the farmhouse, did not follow the others down the corridor, but instead turned right, leading him into the large living room, where he now stood in the entrance, unable to move. "Olaf," Garang called down the corridor. "Come, you need to see this." "What is it? Have you found him?" Olaf shouted back as he pushed past the other two orcs, following in the direction of Garang's voice. "No, but I am certain he was here." "How can you be so certain?" Olaf answered, now coming up to stand behind Garang. "Look," Garang said, turning sideways to allow Olaf a clear view into the living room. Olaf, who had been about to ask what he was looking for, said nothing. Centered on the floor of the living room was a large circle with magical runes drawn outside of it that were now glowing a very strange purplish blue color. "Do you know what it is?" Garang asked. "Some sort of spell," Olaf answered. "A spell, perhaps, to hide the old man from us." "What do we do now?" Garang asked. "I am not sure," Olaf replied. "Do we go in and search for him?" Garang inquired. "Yes, but let us send one of the others in first. If nothing happens, then we will all go in and search through the piles of furniture against the walls," Olaf suggested. Turning to the two orcs behind him, Olaf pointed at the nearest. "You, come here. I need you to go in there and search for the old man." Yes, sir," the orc stuttered, his voice trembling as he responded. Olaf and Garang both backed away from the doorway. The orc took a tentative step forward, then paused inside the doorway. "Now," Olaf commanded, shoving the orc from behind into the room. Nothing happened. Breathing a sigh of relief, the orc crossed the room to the nearest pile of furniture and commenced to disassemble it. Olaf and Garang watched from the doorway for a few minutes more. Seeing nothing happen to their fellow orc, they stepped inside the room, the other orc following in their footsteps. The old man heard the front door as it was ripped from its hinge. He listened to the heavy footfalls of the orcs as they rushed down the narrow corridor, smashing in doors and rummaging about in the rooms in the hopes of finding him. The sounds of a bed being tossed in anger filled his ears clearly. After all, the only barrier between himself and the bedroom was the outside wall. For a moment all was quiet, and then he heard the deep guttural voice of an orc yelling. From the room behind him came a response, along with the receding sound of heavy footsteps marching back down the narrow corridor. The glowing circle had been discovered. It was time. Sliding out from behind the bush, the old man rounded the corner of the farmhouse and, keeping his back against the side wall, sidestepped along the wall, stopping next to a window. Leaning closer to the window, he peered inside. Two of the orcs were deep in conversation, their attention concentrated on the huge glowing circle he had drawn earlier that occupied almost the entire floor of the living room. Minutes passed, the conversation going back and forth between the two orcs. He observed the leader of the four step back along with his companion, pointing to one of the two orcs behind them, and the leader uttered another command, and slowly that orc came forward to stop inside the doorway. With a shove from behind, the orc stumbled forward into the room. For a moment, fear paralyzed the orc, and he was unable to move. When nothing happened, the orc crossed the room and began to sift through one of the piles of furniture. Believing the room to be safe, the other three orcs soon joined him inside the room. Taking one final glance to confirm that all four orcs were now inside the room, the old man stepped away from the wall and moved to stand in the center of the window. Raising both arms in the air, tracing unseen runes in the night sky with his fingers, he proceeded to recite the magical language necessary to cast the spell. Bringing his arms back down to his side, he thrust them forward toward the window. Looking up, he stared directly into the eyes of the orc leader. "Savoosh," he accented the final word, verbalizing it loudly, completing the spell. Olaf stared out the window in disbelief. Framed in the center of the window, he saw the old man, arms high in the air, fingers dancing to patterns he could not see. Mesmerized by the movements, he said nothing as the old man brought his arms down to his side, only to raise them back up again and thrust them forcefully in his direction, simultaneously issuing a single command. Instantly, the room was filled with a brilliant flash of light. The floor seemed to disappear beneath his feet, his body becoming weightless. He was trapped inside a giant vacuum of air, his body being sucked into the atmosphere. For an instant, he felt himself floating. Gravity no longer existed. He was helpless to stop it, and try as he might, he could not get his body to respond to his will. So intense was the force that catapulted him through the he knew not what, that he blacked out. In time, the effects of the spell wore off, and Olaf awakened to find himself and his companions imprisoned in the old man's cell beneath the keep. "Don't bother to get up," a voice spoke in the dimness of the cell. Looking up, Olaf saw Roshan standing in the doorway, flames crackling amongst his fingertips. It was the last thing Olaf saw before death came to claim him. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is Chapter 5. I truly hope you enjoyed it. Again, I welcome your comments, positive and negative. And oh my God, it's pitch black outside. The solar eclipse has hit its moments. It is literally pitch black outside here at 1:40 in the afternoon. So we managed to read that chapter during the eclipse. I think that's pretty cool. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this. Please, again, feel free to leave comments, positive, negative. I welcome constructive criticism, and I look forward to putting Chapter 6 out very soon. Y'all have an awesome day.